Okay, let's dive in. Imagine finding this incredibly detailed, structured advice on how to talk to people, how to really extract critical information, but finding it, like, buried in a military training manual, not some communication textbook.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're looking at today. We're taking a deep dive into parts of a 1997 U.S. Army Intelligence Center subcourse,
Yeah.
IT-0601C, I think it is.
Right. Covering questioning techniques and also map tracking.
Mm-hmm.
And our mission, our goal for this deep dive is really to pull out the core principles, the methods from this official guide. We want to understand not just the steps, but kind of the thinking behind how information is sought and gathered and, crucially, verified, especially under pressure.
Right. It's not just, casual conversation. It's a deliberate system,
Mm.
very specific purpose. And the manual really zeroes in on the questioning phase of an interrogation. So this is when the detainee is actually starting to provide answers.
Okay, and the core objective laid out with, well, military precision, I suppose.
Yeah. It's stated really clearly. Get the maximum amount of usable information in the minimum amount of time.
It's all about actionable intelligence then, for making quick tactical decisions, getting the who, what, where, when, how.
Exactly. And the manual says, start with a logical sequence of questions. Makes sense. But it also stresses flexibility. You have to be ready to chase down unexpected leads as they come up.
Right, you can't just stick rigidly to a script if something important pops up.
No, you'd miss opportunities.
And it's not just asking, is it? The guide highlights other skills the interrogator needs.
Definitely. Spotting important details instantly, knowing how to exploit those leads, being good with maps, actually tracking things spatially, and, of course, recording everything meticulously.
So in that kind of high-pressure situation, maybe language barriers too, what's the recommended approach?
The source points to the direct questioning technique as basically the best choice for that environment.
Okay. What makes it direct? What are its features?
It's designed for efficiency. So questions are brief, concise, simply worded. They focus tightly on specific info, using those basic interrogatives: who, what, when, where, why, how.
Okay, but here's something interesting you mentioned from the source. They aren't just aiming for yes or no.
No, absolutely not. That's critical. They want a narrative response.
A narrative.
Yeah.
Why is that so much better?
Well, think about it. A narrative answer, even a short one, just gives you so much more context, detail, and really importantly, it generates those leads we talked about.
Okay, so if you ask, were you in the city? And get yes, that's pretty useless.
Right. But if you ask, what were you doing in the city? And they describe something, now you've got usable information and maybe something to follow up on.
The manual gives a good example, doesn't it? With an EPW, an enemy prisoner of war.
It does. Instead of did you have officers? Which is just yes, no. Ask direct questions. How many officers are in the 3rd company? Or what are their duty positions? What was your last mission?
Questions that require description.
And beyond those direct questions, the manual lays out several other types. Tools in the toolbox, you could say.
What are they?
Follow-up, non-pertinent, repeated, control, and prepared questions. Each has a specific role.
Okay, let's take follow-up questions first. Seems obvious getting more info, right?
Exactly. They flow naturally from whatever the person just said. Used to exploit a lead that just emerged. The source gives an example. EPW says they were in Brostein.
Okay.
Follow-up. Why there? Picking up supplies. What kind?
Sure.
Ammo and food. When? Dick second. What time? 8 a.m.
Ah, I see. Each answer leads to the next question, digging deeper.
Precisely. You're just fleshing out the details based on what they give you.
Okay, now this next one sounds really interesting. Non-pertinent questions. That sounds counterintuitive.
It does, but the manual gives it a fascinating dual purpose. Sometimes, yeah, it's to hide what you're really after or maybe build a little rapport, make it less intense.
Okay, but the other reason...
The other key reason is to break the person's concentration, their train of thought.
Break their concentration. Why would you want to do that?
Well, especially if you suspect they might be making things up, lying. The manual suggests that suddenly asking about something totally irrelevant, it makes it harder for someone telling a complex lie to keep it all straight.
You're adding cognitive load, basically, making them juggle more.
Exactly. It's subtle. The examples are simple things, like asking, do you have a headache? Or trouble sleeping. Right in the middle of asking about troop movements.
Huh. Sounds odd, but I can see the logic. It's a disruption, a pattern interrupt.
Designed to catch them off guard, maybe reveal an inconsistency when they switch back.
Okay. Then there are repeated questions, asking the same thing again.
Essentially, yes. Asking for the same information again, maybe phrased a bit differently or brought up later in a different context.
And the point is,
Checking consistency over time. It's just harder to remember the details of a lie than it is to recall the truth.
right, simple truth is easier to repeat.
The manual suggests spacing these out, hours, maybe even days later, so they don't see it coming. They can also be used to circle back to something the person seemed evasive about earlier.
Is there an example for this one,
A
too?
good one. Asking about, say, ZSU 23-4 anti-aircraft guns, their count and armament. Maybe they initially say there were 4. Much later, you casually ask something like, so how were the 5 ZSU 23-4s positioned?
And if they correct you?
If they jump in with, 5, there were only 4,
Well,
then they've just flagged an inconsistency themselves. Or maybe confirm the number 4 is reliable for them.
clever. Okay, next type.
Control questions. These are questions where the interrogator already knows the answer is true. Verified information.
So like a test.
Exactly. It's purely a check on the EPW's truthfulness or knowledge. If they get a control question wrong, something you know the answer to, well, that casts doubt on everything else they're saying. Or shows they just don't know.
The manual's example was about rifles, wasn't it?
Yeah. If intelligence says a unit definitely has AK-74s, you ask the EPW what individual weapon their unit used. If they say AKM or something else, big red flag about their reliability regarding that unit.
Makes sense. And the last type. Prepared questions.
Right. These are just questions written out in advance, useful for technical details or complex stuff where you need precision. But the manual also warns, don't be too rigid, still gotta adapt.
So that's the toolkit of questions to use. Just as vital, the manual also details questions to avoid.
Absolutely. Starting with leading questions, generally a bad idea.
Why is that?
Because they basically suggest the answer you want to hear. They prompt a specific response, which might not be accurate.
Like the example, did you go back to your unit?
Yeah. It pushes for a simple yes-no. You lose the chance for a narrative, for details. The manual does say experts might use them sometimes, but carefully. Maybe for verification, like confirming a point on a map they just discussed.
Okay. Avoid leading questions. What else?
Vague questions. Anything unclear, incomplete, too general.
Why are they bad?
They just confuse people, waste time. Easy to dodge or give an ambiguous answer to. You don't get solid info.
And compound questions too, right. Asking 2 things at once.
Yeah, definitely avoid those. It's hard to answer accurately. Often you only get half an answer or a muddled one. The example was about training. What training did you get at basic and advanced?
Right, they might just talk about basic or mix them up.
You just don't get clear, separate answers for each part. Much better to ask 2 separate questions.
Okay. And the last one to avoid. Negative questions.
Yes, strongly advised against. They are notoriously confusing.
The example they gave really highlighted that ambiguity.
It did. You do not know whether Smith went to the headquarters last night.
If the answer is yes, what does that even mean?
Exactly. It doesn't mean, yes, it's true, I don't know, or yes, I do know that he didn't go, that he did go. It's completely useless information.
Okay, so you asked your questions, hopefully the right types, avoided the bad ones. Now you're getting answers. How do you manage all that incoming information? Spotting the important stuff.
Right, information management. The manual talks about spot reportable information. This is basically anything critical for friendly forces, like right now. It's always time sensitive.
And its value depends entirely on speed.
Pretty much. The faster it gets up the chain to someone who can act on it, the more valuable it is.
How do you identify it? How do you know this piece of info is spot reportable?
You compare it against your own side's objectives, or look for signs of a big change in what the enemy can do or intends to do. The manual mentions using the salute format for reporting it. Sometimes they'll even pause the interrogation just to rush that info out.
Okay, and what about leads, signs of more information?
They break leads down into 2 types, hot and cold. Hot leads are things that might contain that spot reportable, time-sensitive info. You jump on those immediately.
And cold leads.
Still potentially valuable intelligence, but maybe not critical right now. You make a note, circle back to it later when you're covering that topic.
Got it. And what about hearsay? Information the EPW heard from someone else.
Yeah, hearsay. The manual is really strict on this. You can report it, but you absolutely must include details about the original source.
Like who they were.
Yes. Their name, duty position, unit. And crucially, when did that original source actually see the thing they talked about?
Without that context, the hearsay is pretty much worthless.
Close to it. You need to know who said it and when they supposedly saw it to even begin assessing its credibility.
Okay, that covers the questioning side really well. Let's shift gears now to the second major technique, map tracking.
Right. Lesson 2 in the source material, described as a critical facet of map reading for interrogators. It's not just about reading maps, it's using them interactively.
And maps themselves are called extremely valuable tools. What's the goal of map tracking?
The main goal is to extract information by getting the EPW to trace their movements and observations on a map, specifically things they knew before they were captured, usually focusing on enemy positions or activities known within the last, say, 72 hours before capture.
And a key prerequisite is
The interrogator has to be really good at map reading themselves. Proficient. You also need the right maps. Large scale is better for detail, and you need to know the EPW's point of capture, the POC coordinates.
where they were caught,
Mm.
and the circumstances of capture, the COC, the situation.
Exactly. Those details provide context.
So you have the EPW, the map.
Mhm.
Where do you actually start the tracking process?
First step is establishing what they call an initial common reference point, or ICRP. This needs to be a location on the ground that both you and the EPW can definitely identify on the map, a shared starting point.
And the manual suggests using the point of capture, the POC, as the first attempt for the ICRP.
Yes. Ask them to describe where they were captured. If their description is good enough to plot accurately, that's your ICRP.
But what if, the EPW can't really read a map? Does the whole thing just stop there?
Not necessarily. This is where the interrogator's skill comes in. The manual says assess their map skills first. Can they point things out? If not, try to orient them and, turn the map so it matches the ground they remember. If they still can't really use it, ask if they know compass directions. North, south, east, west.
And if they do?
Verify it. Make sure their north is actually north. If they don't know directions, then you fall back on relative term.
Like left, right, towards that big hill.
Exactly. The key is guiding them through their spatial memory, using whatever terms they understand. Even if it's not map symbols or coordinates, you adapt.
That's really important, adapting the technique. So you get the ICRP established somehow. Maybe the POC, maybe another point they described clearly. What's next?
Next, you establish the Destination Common Reference Point, the DCRP. This is another location they visited, usually further back in time or distance from the ICRP. The idea is generally to pick a point that lets you trace the longest relevant route back to the ICRP, furthest back in time or distance, or maybe highest command level they visited.
And like the ICRP, it has to be describable enough for you to plot it accurately on the map.
Correct. Needs to be a solid anchor point.
So now you have a start point, ICRP, and an end point, DCRP. Then you trace the route between them.
Yes. And this is where it gets detailed. You work along the route, usually segment by segment, between landmarks or turns. For each segment, you need to get 4 key things. Direction of travel.
Like northeast or towards the river.
Right. Then the surface description, road, path, cross-country. Third, the distance traveled along that segment.
How far they went in that direction.
And fourth, descriptions of prominent terrain features they remember seeing along that specific part of the route. Hills, streams, buildings, anything distinctive.
So those details help you plot intermediate points along the route, creating more reference points as you go.
Exactly. Those are intermediate CRPs. You use that sequence, direction, surface, distance features to reconstruct the path on the map piece by piece, usually tracing from the DCRP towards the ICRP if the DCRP was a specific spot, or maybe working backwards from the ICRP if the DCRP was more vague, like the forest edge.
Okay, the route is traced on the map. Now what? You start pulling more specific intel from that map, right?
Precisely. First, you exploit the DCRP itself.
What are you looking for at that destination point?
Anything of military significance the EPW knew about right there at that location. Specific things like what units were there, any security measures they saw, where they got the information from, did they see it themselves or did someone tell them?
Hearsay again.
Right. And critically, the date they had this info, or if it was hearsay, who told them and when did that person see it? Timing is crucial.
Got it. Then after exploiting the DCRP, you move along the route.
Yes, you exploit the route segments. You work methodically along the path you trace, segment by segment, between those CRPs you establish.
And for each segment.
You ask about anything of military significance they saw, heard, or knew about along that specific path. Not just anywhere, but on that stretch of the route.
What if they mentioned something important, but it wasn't actually on the route they just traced?
Good question. If a new location comes up that's off the main path, the manual says you establish a new route to that location from a known point, and then exploit that new location and route just like you did the others.
So you keep branching out to cover all the significant places they mention. It sounds very systematic.
It is very methodical. And to finish up the map tracking part, you do a final sweep. Ask about any other locations or objects of military importance they know about that haven't already come up during the route tracing. A final catch-all.
And the result, the physical outcome of all this map tracking.
It's the interrogator's map. Marked up with all the enemy dispositions plotted, the goal is within 100 meters accuracy if possible, and with descriptive notes written right there on the map next to the symbols.
Okay, so this brings it all together. We've got these questioning techniques, we've got this detailed map tracking. Why is this combined approach so valuable, according to the manual? How does it connect?
Well, first, the map tracking helps the tactical commander literally visualize the battlefield based on what the EPW is saying and makes the information spatial. But maybe more fundamentally, this whole structured process, leading the EPW logically through their memory, both verbally and spatially, is really key for assessing their reliability. Because you're building this detailed framework of what they claim to know, a story grounded in time and space, you can then compare that framework, those specific details plotted on the map, against information from completely different sources. Other EPWs, aerial photos, signal intercepts, whatever.
So the map tracking provides concrete details that are easier to cross-reference and verify.
Exactly. It helps you see if their story holds up when compared to other intelligence. It makes it much easier to judge truthfulness and accuracy.
So wrapping this up, what have we really pulled out from this deep dive into a 1997 Army manual?
I think we've seen a really fascinating, highly structured system. It combines specific question types used very strategically.
Yeah, like those non-pertinent ones to break concentration or control questions for verification.
Right. Combines those with this meticulous method for mapping out movements and observations spatially.
It's a powerful reminder, really, that getting reliable information, especially when stakes are high, isn't just luck. It relies on precision, planning, adapting.
And understanding some psychology, too, like cognitive load, consistency checking, and the absolute need to verify, especially using spatial context.
And while this comes straight from a military source, the underlying ideas,
Yeah.
they seem much broader, don't they?
Absolutely. Using different question types for different goals, checking consistency, verifying against known facts, building that clear spatial picture. You can see echoes of that in good journalism and investigations, historical research, really anywhere that getting accurate information from someone's memory is both critical and, frankly, difficult.
It really makes you pause and think, doesn't it? How much of what we think we know about the world relies not just on what people tell us, but on how we ask, and maybe even more critically, how we check those details against other facts, against the physical reality, the spatial layout of things.
Yeah. It highlights the sheer effort, the meticulous, structured work that can go into pinning down just one single reliable piece of information. That's not always easy.